أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wherever you are, whatever time it may be, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you and your loved ones, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And thank you for joining us here on Let Us Talk About It, where we try to keep it relevant and informative to the best of our abilities. So the month of Rajab is almost over, and in a couple of days we will be starting the countdown, the real countdown towards the month of Ramadan. We will be beginning soon the month of Sha'ban, and we would say what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us: Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab, barik lana fi Sha'ban, wa ballighna Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless for us the month of Rajab, the month of Sha'ban, and may our lives be extended until we witness the blessings of the month of Ramadan. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Really excited for our topic here today. So a few years back, there was a very popular course that was taking place. Shahada in 10 minutes. And say, Shahada in 10 minutes, what does that even mean? It was a course that supposedly would teach you how to guide somebody into Shahada in 10 minutes. And it was taught by Shaykh Kamal Mekki, and it was very popular, mashallah, tabarakallah. And I never knew what was the outcome of that course, what people were taught in that course, and how did that course come to be, and what were the consequences and the good that came out of it. And who is here to talk to us about that course is the person that actually taught the course. A pleasure to have a good friend of mine, Shaykhna Kamal Mekki. Thank you for being with us here this evening. Salamu alaikum, ya Shaykhna.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is a tremendous pleasure and an honor for me to be with you. Jazakallah khair. Shukran.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair, ya Rabbil Alameen. Alrighty. So, Shahada in 10 minutes. Can you please tell us what is it like? Teaching people in 10 minutes how to give Shahada, conversing with a person to give Shahada in 10 minutes. If you can please take us back to that course, tell us the story, how the course came to be, and what was the aim of that course.
Absolutely. The first two things that best to start with. First of all, the course itself was 5 hours.
Okay.
It wasn't 10 minutes in the course. So 5 hours of instruction. And then the other thing is that the name was basically to be attractive and as part of its marketing. And sometimes some people would take it literally and they would complain, like, how can you do that in 10 minutes? Some people take years. But of course, even in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, there were some people he spoke to for a few minutes and they became Muslim. So it's not necessary, as some people claim, that it takes 23 years. 23 years was what it took to transform the entire Arabian Peninsula. Anyways, it was just a name, right? And it was catchy and it was popular back then. But how was it developed? That's the story. So, and it was basically a long process. Initially, I would give da'wah using the 1970s style. You quote the scientific miracles of the Quran, and you quote science, and you quote this, and then you clear misconceptions, and then there's this awkward silence, right? And then I met these brothers. And every day I see them, they're like, oh yeah, 4 people took Shahada yesterday. 5 people took Shahada the day before. 6 people took Shahada this morning. How do you do it? So I started hanging out with them. This is in DC. We'd go around the streets of DC. And before that, I actually gave them a full year. And we gave them opportunities on a radio show to explain their style and technique. And they couldn't really explain it. So I figured the only way was for me to learn it from them and then put it in a way that was digestible and I could teach it to others. So then, I learned the techniques from them, but then you add to it from human behavior and from psychology, from negotiation, from sales. So in the end, we gathered everything you would need in your arsenal to be effective within a short span of time.
I like what you're saying. I think initially you were pitching it like it was a sales move, but the whole idea here is that to make what you're offering people, in this case, which is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as attractive as possible. And I always talk to people about the need to our deen makes intellectual sense, and I think that what we needed to work on is to make cultural sense out of the deen, the way that we deliver that. So take us through the techniques. What did the people in DC do to be giving all these shahadas every day?
Okay, great. So basically, if I were to just sum it up in really 2 points, they would, we call them the golden rules in the class, right? Okay, let me put it this way. I used to go stand in front of this grocery store that belonged to a Muslim, and I would have my pamphlets with me and everything, and I'd go dressed up and I'd stand there, and I would stop people and say, I'll give you a 5-minute introduction to Islam. And I had rehearsed it and everything, and it would come out smooth, and it would go through it. And then when it's over, I would stare at them because it's done, I'm done. And they would stare back at me, and there's just awkward silence. And I didn't know what to say at that point, and they didn't know what I wanted. I thought that the minute I explained to them Islam in brief, they're going to beg me to let them become Muslim. And so when I discovered this rule, I went from zero, and forgive me for saying shahadas here, because in the class, the first thing I teach is we don't count shahadas. Because they don't really count. What counts is the follow-up. We can talk about that later. But so I thought that they're going to ask me to beg them, to let them enter Islam. When I discovered the golden rule, it was a difference between 0 shahadas my entire life and 5 shahadas a day. And here's the golden rule. Should we share it with the viewers or just keep it a
Do
secret
me a
for now?
favor. Don't do that yet. I had a question. So you're
Okay.
standing you're standing in front of the store and you tell somebody, I am going to share an introduction of 5 minutes about Islam. Why would I listen? Why would I want to listen?
I don't know, but everybody listened, unless
Interesting.
unless people were in a hurry. Well, I tell you, for real, those who are experienced, they know what I'm saying. It was in the poor parts of town. You will always get reception in the poor parts of town. I don't care what anybody says. People are humble, down to earth, and it's so easy. That's why in the 16 or 12 years where I used to teach the class, and then I would take people out in the street, I would always insist that we go to the poorer parts of town. And there was one city where they were arguing with me, and they were like, no, we're going to go to the tourist area. And I insisted. And so we went to the poor parts of town, and then we went to the tourist area, and it was night and day difference. So for your first experience, if you're going to do street dawah, you want to be in those nice, humble areas, and you'll get some good results. It won't be intimidating for sure. So people just stopped. They were intrigued. I was dressed differently, and they were intrigued. So they would listen. I don't
Nice.
even know.
Nice. Okay. So now you're doing this, and now comes the golden rule that everybody is been in suspense for the past few minutes to hear about it.
All right.
So when we hear the golden
Golden
rule, we
rule.
think about, love for your brother, what you love for yourself.
Yeah, this is the golden rule of da'wah. The golden rule is, okay, it is to ask for the shahada. And it's as simple as that. You have to ask for the shahada. If you don't ask, okay, let's look at it this way. Has there ever been a time Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to a tribe or a person to bring them to Islam, and then he got there and didn't call them to Islam? Even the question doesn't make sense. You have to ask for the shahada. I'll give you an interesting comparison in the area of sales. So they were examining why a sale won't go through. And there are 1,001 different reasons why someone will not buy or commit to buy something. It was the wrong size, wrong color, I only had cash, they accepted cards, I need to consult my wife. 1,001 reasons. But they found that 96% of the time, the salesman or the salesperson didn't ask for the sale. That's it. You have to ask for the sale. What's the value? Why am I talking to you and convincing you that Allah is one and that Muhammad is his messenger? Here are the 5 pillars and this is what you need and you need to follow his message. If I don't ask you to accept his message, you have to ask for the shahada. And it's not being pushy and it's not being rude. It's just asking someone, now that you agree with what we've said, these are actually the ingredients that make you a Muslim. So why don't you become Muslim right now? You have to ask for the shahada.
Was that would people listening to this are saying, okay, look, I'm excited with what I'm hearing. I'm just going to present an absent opinion here and say, was that a form of pressure on people?
Definitely not. And I always tell people, and I've seen du'at who pressure people into saying the shahada. Number one, it doesn't count because they're saying it just so you can leave them alone or for whatever other reason. And so we say you never pressure. And if there's someone that allows you to pressure them, then it's your job to make a judgment call and not push for the shahada. So don't be pushy. We're not pushy salesmen. We don't play games, dirty tricks. We're not conniving or deceptive. You're asking them, do you believe there is one God? Do you believe that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was one of the messengers sent by Allah? And then they say yes. Then you say, you know how you become Muslim? By saying with your tongue and believing in your heart what you just agreed with. So you actually have the ingredients of a Muslim. Why don't you become Muslim right now? And that's just the way I said it to you. There's no pressure or anything. And like I said, I've seen du'at pressure people, and it's on them. Like it's your fault. You shouldn't do that. We don't need to do that.
That is interesting. And the other thing is, I guess people's impression is that religion in the US is a very private matter. You're not supposed to be discussing that with people. And are you not just becoming the next Jehovah Witness? Are you not the you know the next Mormon? You know, they go around passing on their books, visiting you at home, giving you their I
Right.
think it's called Awake, their magazine.
Yeah, absolutely.
How is that different?
Okay. Wonderful. And one of the things you have to do is you have to set yourself apart from everybody else. And that's why in the class we even talk about how you dress. We don't wear sunglasses. You want eye contact. If you had bad breath, you get a mint. You want you want it to be a wonderful experience. You're smiling, you're having a discussion, you're telling them this is what we believe. You're not pushy, you're not too preachy. So and in standing out, I want to. I'll share some techniques that I've never used. Okay, and I don't think you should use them, but I'll just tell you when you stand out, what happens. So there was a da'iyah, and he used to pass out these small little pamphlets, and he would say, "Here's some reading material for you. Here's a message for you." Right? And it kind of sounds like what everyone else is doing. Everyone else was passing out material, so we would pass out material, and we would ask a question that will pique their interest, an intriguing question. So we would say, what is the purpose of life, sir? What is the purpose of life, ma'am? How are you doing? Do you know what the purpose of life is? And then part of asking that question is to get them to stop and engage you in conversation, and it would work wonderfully, right? And they would say, well, the purpose of life is this. Well, that's wonderful. Let me tell you what Islam says is the purpose of life. And then we start a discussion, and we keep it friendly. So you have to set yourself apart from everyone else. I'll tell you something interesting, and you're a psychology guy, right? Studies show that the panhandler that stand on the street and they say, "Excuse me, can you spare a quarter? Can you spare a quarter? Do you have any change? Can you spare some change?" What do? You say no immediately because you hear that all the time. You don't put any thought. You just say no. But then studies show that when you ask people for 37 cents, an obscure number like 37 cents, you highly increase your chances of getting that money because now they stopped and think about it. Why does he need 37 exactly? Maybe that's how much he needs to get his morning coffee, or maybe that's how much he needs for the bus ticket, or maybe for the sandwich, he's just short 37. So you increase your chances of getting it. So from that study, we learned you got to sound different from the beginning. You don't want to be rude or obnoxious. You don't want to be in their face, but you also don't want to sound like any other, missionary, witness, elder from the Mormons or what have you. So we used a lot of things to come off different, and have it and make sure that it's a different experience for the people.
All right. And is the end goal when you're meeting with these people, is the end goal you're doing what you're doing, you're saying what you're saying with the intent that by the end of this conversation, 5-10 minutes, this person is going to take their shahada? Is that like the immediate goal that's going through my mind as I'm talking to these
Okay,
people?
great. And in the course, what I used to clarify to people is that you have what is your goal? Like, let's say there's a law being passed, they're trying to ban the hijab. So my da'wah table, I'm going to be speaking about the woman's right to wear the hijab, the wisdom behind the hijab, the reason the woman wears the hijab. And I'm not going to try to bring up Kashmir, Palestine. I'm not going to try to get shahadas. You're going to stay focused to your goal. If I go out to the street and my goal is to get people to say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, then that's what I'm going to be targeting. My talk, everything's going to be directed towards that. And so it's not good to have this confusion. Like, I was with one civil rights Muslim organization, and they had opportunities to meet senators. And then one of them said, Don't forget, when you meet the senator, you have to bring them, ask them to accept Islam. Like, wait a minute, what's your focus here? You want them to vote this way on a bill, so that keep that your focus. You're not gonna, in the middle of that, ask them to become Muslim. So, but if that's your focus, you stay with it 100%. Like, if we have a car dealership, all right, let's say you own a car dealership, and you have a salesperson that is wonderful, spends time with them, he goes on a test drive and drives around with them and everything, and they love the experience, but he never asks for the sale, never tries to make a sale. You're going to bring him into your office, you're going to talk to him like, you need to sell. If I'm going out to sell, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to sell. If I'm going out to bring awareness for Kashmir, I'm not going to sell. I'm just going to talk about Kashmir. If it's hijab, it's hijab. So, but we used to go out, just to clarify to the audience, we used to go out for street da'wah, and our point was, we're going to sell. We're not going to be pushy, but we're going to sell. And we're not going to be conniving. I got some funny stories for you, right?
Okay. Well, we are all ears. And I think we get excited about how people accepted Islam. And as individuals, we aspire to always be part of that process of a person accepted Islam and somehow we played a role in the acceptance of their Islam. Like we feel that we brought the person to the right path. We saved the person from eternal hell in the hereafter. We, put the person on the right track in this life. And what I've been told is that, getting a person to say Shahada is a process. You just want to be part of that process. You may not be the person that they immediately take the Shahada from, but you planted a seed somewhere there. So what happens to the people who heard you and they refused to take the Shahada? Would you say that was also a success story if people did not end up taking their Shahada?
Okay, wonderful. So, man, you brought up so many great things. Let's get that.
I do this
last
all
one
the time,
first.
by the way. So,
MashaAllah, you're just oozing great. Look, let's start with that last one. So, the last one, what's fair is we break it up into two different equations. From your end as a da'iyah, you get reward for calling to Allah. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا. Right? The verse says, who is better in speech than the one who calls to Allah? You don't get a commission if someone becomes Muslim. Nuh alayhi salam called his people for 950 years and only a few people believed. He gets the reward for the 950 years of calling people to Allah, not just for the few. So from the side of the da'iyah, you win whether the person takes shahada or not. You're doing the greatest act of, a great act of worship, the greatest thing you can do by the tongue. You're calling people to Allah. From the side of the, let's just call the mad'u here, the person you're calling to Allah, they benefit, they win if they become Muslim. And sometimes, just like you said, you don't become Muslim right now, but maybe I planted the seed. I've met people who became Muslim 5 years after a conversation, 3 years after a conversation. So you're still part of that great process, but your success is not determined by how many people become Muslim. And as you know from that hadith of prophets on the Day of Judgment will come up alone with no followers. So it's not about numbers.
Nice. And by the way, for our viewers, if you do have a question about this topic, please do use the chat box on YouTube, and inshallah, we will address your questions as we go on. All right. So you would consider a person who was given 5-minute introduction to Islam still would be a success, both for you as a da'i, a person who calls people to the path of Allah, as well as the recipient of that person, simply because you may have planted a seed there. Alrighty, how did you gauge your success? Was it by the number of shahadas? Because you alluded to it earlier. It's not just the shahada, it's what becomes of the person after the shahada.
Yeah. And okay, let me tell you something interesting, okay? Because we don't really have excellent research in this area. We don't have any official research. So the next best thing is years and years or decades of collective experience. So I'll tell you something interesting I used to do. Every time I would meet experienced du'at, and by that I mean people who have a lot of hours of da'wah under their belt. I did this in Scotland, in Ireland, in South Africa, in Australia. Everywhere I went and I met experienced du'at, I asked them the same question. If you give shahada to, let's say, 100 people in the month of March, all right? and you never contact any of them. No follow-up is done whatsoever. They were not taken to the masjid. They were not given biryani or anything that makes them part of the community, right? Zero contact. And then you start calling them a month later. What percentage of them will remain upon Islam? All right. We don't have, like I said, any official study, but the next best thing, years of collective dua and their experience. All right. And not a single time, Shaykh Yasir, did a da'iyah give me a different number. All of them give me the exact same number or numbers. But would you like to take a guess? Like how many, if you, without any follow-up, what percentage of that 100 will remain upon Islam?
I would say it would be less than 10.
Fantastic. Okay. There's not a da'iyah I asked that question, except they said 1 or 2%.
Wow.
And from my personal experience, that is absolutely true. And by the way, now when we started to do a little bit of surveys and stuff with reverts, so we found that when someone takes the Shahada, the first 24 hours are the most dangerous. If you leave them alone completely, there's a high chance of them leaving Islam in the first 24 hours. Then after that, the first 48 hours, less dangerous, but still high risk. And then that first week, and we've seen, like, if you continue to follow up with the individual for that first week, once they make it past that first week, inshallah, there's a high chance of them remaining Muslim. So what does that mean? And that's why I always start the da'wah class by warning against the numbers game, where people just get shahadas and they count the numbers. And I've met some du'at. I've met one who would say, yeah, I brought to Islam 1,536 people. Like, first of all, how do you keep count? Do you get a tattoo every time someone becomes Muslim, or how do you do it? And I know him personally, he would just in the street let them go, not even get their number, and no follow-up. So then realistically, from that 1,500, we're talking about 1% of that, which is like 15 people. So instead of spending hours talking to 1,500 people, why don't you build up your 15? And that's why the one thing, do not be fooled by getting shahadas. I would tell people okay, I call this the life cycle of the da'iyah. And as much as I warn people in class, they don't believe me until they go through the life cycle themselves. The first thing is you get your first shahada and you feel great and you feel excited and elated. And you're like, I got to do this again. I have to get this rush again. So they go and get a second shahada and a third and a fourth and a fifth. And then they get so many that getting a shahada is not exciting anymore. And then what happens? They start to realize, one of two things happen. Some of them drop off because there's no excitement. But the other thing is, they start to realize it's not about the shahadas, it's about the follow-up. And when you don't see the results, and you know this from psychology, they say human beings they're not inspired by a drop in the bucket. And if you can see the results and the fruits of your work or your labor, you're more motivated to stay active. So for example, if I go out every Saturday and Sunday and stand in the streets of Houston and call people to Allah, and I get shahadas in the street, but I don't follow up with them, after a while, it's just going to be standing for hours in the heat, talking to people, and then I don't see the results. But what if I follow up with them, and when I come to the masjid for Maghrib, I see my shahada from last month right there in the line. Next to me is my shahada from 2 weeks ago, and over there is a shahada from 6 months ago. I would never lose steam and motivation at that point. So then they start to realize that I'm not doing anything. I don't see these people ever again. And they start to realize the importance of follow-up. And that's really the real challenge. As for getting a shahada in the street, yeah, I'm telling you it, and I'm not exaggerating here. It's the easiest thing in the world. I can come down to Memphis next month and we go out in the street, me and some people from your masjid, and we'll get like 30, 40, 50 shahadas. But that's not difficult. The real challenge is the follow-up.
And when you say follow-up, and I appreciate what you're saying, what does that mean? What does follow-up mean?
Okay. So now, let's put it this way. If I have 50 shahadas, 30 shahadas, I will have an Excel sheet that has this person's contact info, and then who's their contact person from the masjid, and then I'll update it. Are they now praying? Do they know Al-Fatiha? And all that. But if you get one shahada, I'll tell you honestly, man, follow-up is just being a friend to them. It's just being a human being there, keeping in contact. That's all it is. And if people sometimes, let's do a workshop on the follow-up. Maybe if you get a shahada, one guy, just be his friend. It's that, just take him out for dinner, give him some butter chicken, he'll fall in love with the community, chapli kebab, whatever. But so it's really just some kind of contact with, he needs to be part of a community, and introduce him to the community and give him books and start teaching him how to pray. Then call him every now and then, hey, are you coming to the masjid? And then after a week, you don't even have to do that. You'll walk in, you'll find him in the masjid by himself. So follow-up is just like, really, in simple terms, just being their friend, their new friend, and someone holding their hand through this early, stages of them becoming Muslim. And really, I'm not oversimplifying. It's that simple for the most part.
Nice. Okay, so some of our viewers are actually coming up with some really nice questions. The notion of changing your religion is a very difficult, it's a very difficult task. People may not be religious. Sometimes Muslims, not necessarily practicing Muslims, they, they're not practicing Muslims, but the idea of converting, leaving Islam is very difficult for them. It's almost like treason. So if somebody was raised Catholic, even though, they really did not go to church and they were not very observant, and you come and you offer them this, what is their motive at that point? Why would they just disregard what they were brought up with? What is it that you're giving them that's better than what they have?
Right. And that's why I'm starting by saying it's not that difficult. I mean, I'm telling you about 20 years of experience, personal experience, and it's actually not that difficult. Like I said, it's the easiest thing in the world to get a Shahada. It's sales, it's easy, right? And you would imagine, especially with all due respect, like if I didn't have any experience in dawah, I would imagine, oh no, there's no way that people are going to switch their religion. And maybe you're thinking about it because you're Muslim and you're like firm on your deen, so you imagine everyone else is firm. You will be surprised how many people are just right at the edge and they just need a little bit of encouragement. They're just right at the edge. So what we present with is strong, and what people need to realize is that when the truth and falsehood collide, and falsehood here, whatever it is, okay, collide, that collision it like destroys the falsehood. So when we present them with Islam, even if it's within 5 minutes, it immediately resonates with people. And we have a lot of very strong advantages. For example, Tawheed is your biggest advantage because there's nothing easier than believing in one God. Like one is the easiest number, easier than zero even, philosophically. And then the biggest disadvantage the other person has, let's say in the case of a Christian, is that they believe in three gods that are physically separate, yet they're one. And though one of them died for 3 days, they were still one instead of becoming two. And that's not possible for people to understand that. You cannot understand that. It's very difficult. And I'm presenting you with a concept that makes perfect sense. And not only that, it was taught throughout the Old Testament the whole time. And then in the New Testament, Jesus taught it as well. And it resonates with people and becomes clear to them. And of course, if you're well versed in the Bible and you can quote passages and what have you, then that also gives you another advantage. But I'll tell you, it is not that hard for people to switch their religion. They're not as firm as you believe you are or Muslims are.
Nice. Okay, you said something earlier about it is in poorer neighborhoods that you saw most positive reaction to what it is that you were giving to people. Would the approach change, let's say, if you were to do the same thing at a university and, these are supposedly scientists, let's say, for example, students who are being taught about critical thinking, would the approach change at that point?
Okay, so the short answer is actually no. The short answer is no. You might slightly change the way you speak, but I'll tell you about two friends of mine. These two guys, they went to one university and they got 70 shahadas in one day. Like they actually lost count after 60. These are university students, intellectual, rational, whatever, logical. They lost count after 60. This is in one day, right? And these are the people that I, used to learn from and hang out with and everything. And one of them, I have never seen a human being with a tongue like this guy. Okay, I'm not going to mention his name, but I've never seen anyone with a tongue like that. When you hear him give da'wah, you want to re-say the Shahada. Like, he is amazing.
MashaAllah.
But what's interesting about him is he uses the same speech with college professors. He used to do a lot of university da'wah. With college professors, he would use the same speech. With homeless people, he's using the same speech. And you won't even believe. You want to know what he used to say? You won't even believe it. His talk was about the 3 questions in the grave and the hellfire. And college professors and philosophy students and homeless people, everybody would become Muslim from that. What do you say to that?
I say that is interesting. That is interesting that he would use this approach.
I wouldn't, right? But it worked for him. It's insane. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you an interesting story, okay? There was one Muslim, and we asked him, like, how did you become Muslim? He said, I was, okay, excuse me, audience, for this, but this is a true story. He said, I was buying drugs from a drug dealer, all right? In the middle of the process, I'm giving him the money, he's giving me the drugs. Just for no reason, the drug dealer said, and he's not even a Muslim drug dealer, right? Alhamdulillah. But for no reason, he just suddenly said, hey, you know who the best people are? These Muslims, they are the best people. Okay, that'll be $50, and here are your drugs, and have a nice day. He said, I took the drugs, smoked them, snorted them. I don't know what he did with them. He said, I used them up that night. Next morning, I woke up and I said to myself, the drug dealer said, Muslims are the best people. I started Googling Islam. He became Muslim. So honestly, what kind of conclusion can you make out of this story? I always tell people that means we should all sell drugs, right? Of course not. It's just basically, da'wah is so situational, and there's so many variables, there's so many things that come into it. Like, I'm surprised that this guy, he tells college professors about the 3 questions in the grave, and he gets shahadas like insane amount. I've never seen anyone like him before. Until now, I've never seen anyone like him. And I wouldn't use this technique. But one thing I learned early on is never say never. Never, you never know what. Look, I'll tell you another crazy story. Or I think you know this story. This guy, one of my friends in Virginia asked him, he said, how did you become Muslim? He said, I don't want to tell you because you're going to laugh at me. He said, I promise not to laugh. He said, well, one day I walked into a public restroom and I found all these grown men with their foot in the sink, washing their feet. Now, why would that make you become Muslim if they're washing their feet? He said, in his mind, you are washing your feet before you stand before your Lord. That is the utmost respect. And it resonated with him. He became Muslim.
Interesting.
Never say never.
Interesting. And I love how you're putting it. It's like you never know which part of the deen is going to catch the attention of that person and plant that seed. Reminds me of the story of this brother who's, mashallah, a da'i right now himself. And he was actually drinking alcohol. And one of the people that he was drinking with was another Muslim. And the Muslim was drinking the alcohol saying, man, I shouldn't be doing this, man. I am a Muslim, man. I shouldn't be doing this. And he was just gulping the alcohol. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, in Islam, we're not supposed to touch alcohol. We're not supposed to sell it, serve it, or be in the vicinity where it's consumed. And he said, that just got me thinking. He said, I went home and he literally became a Muslim because of something like this. Another question also is who was more recipient of this or receptive of this, brothers or sisters? And did your da'wah include sisters as well in the process or not?
Okay, so first of all, let me start off with an interesting statistic. They say for every male who becomes Muslim in America, 5 women. Or no, 4. So 1 out of every 5 Muslims, new Muslims or Shahadas, if you use that term, is male, and 4 out of 5 are female, are women actually. So the largest number that's accepting Islam are women. As far as women du'at, so my experience at George Mason University, the best du'at I've seen were these sisters at George Mason. Until today, I talk about them. This was like 15 years ago or something. They were amazing. Like, they would actually go set up a da'wah table at the university down the street, get shahadas, shut that one down, come over here, set up our da'wah table, get shahadas. I mean, they were on fire. Now, let me tell you what the brothers did, Shaykh Yasir. They would come to me because I was the chaplain, frowning. Brother, these sisters are talking to men. I said, yeah, I know, they're giving da'wah. Like, yeah, but they're talking to strange men. I said, okay, I have an idea. You go do it. Brother, I'm busy. But, you know, You can see the frustration, right? So the sisters do the great, great work, and we know that well enough, I think, now. We don't have to give evidence.
Just also for our viewers, I think that the fastest growing segment within our population, Muslim population, that is, are actually Latinas. Latinas are the fastest growing segment within the population. And again, you would think that would not be the case. And statistically speaking, they're talking about these are people who are either via marriage or because people just wanting to get their roots or trace their roots back. And a good number of them, they traced their roots back to Spain. And as you know that Spain was under Muslim control for about 800 years. And there was an anthropologist who suggested that if your name ends in EZ, you most likely come from a Muslim background. So Rodriguez, Sanchez, Jimenez, all these people would be like, this is like an indication of Muslim background and so on. But then again, you would not think that Latinas would be the fastest growing segment within the Muslim community. Sheikh, now what about giving da'wah to non-Muslims to become Muslims? What about the Pew research that just came out recently? Not recently, but a few years back, that 25% or 23% of second-generation Muslims do not identify as Muslims, meaning that 1 out of every 4 second-generation Muslims does not identify as a Muslim. What about da'wah to Muslims who are doubting?
Okay. Oh, first of all, I have to throw in something about Latino Muslims. In Houston is home of Islam in Spanish. I'm sure you've heard of Islam in
Of course,
Spanish.
of
And
course.
Shaykh Yasir Fazaga and Mujahid Fletcher. There's amazing people who do phenomenal work. And when you visit them, even in the first 5 minutes, you just feel that this is just a family. It's amazing. They're amazing people. Quran's in Spanish. And yes, absolutely, it is growing. And we should support that 100% with wonderful workers. What you said is so true. And meaning many people know that the biggest challenge for Muslims in the West will be in the coming years will be young Muslims leaving Islam or not identifying as Muslim. And yes, it's true that initially I was involved with how to teach Muslims to give da'wah to non-Muslims. And that was my workshop for the longest time. And then when I joined the Maghrib Institute, I actually, it was a 4-day class total. It was a double weekend. And we incorporated an entire section on giving da'wah to Muslims. And since then, this was like 10 years ago, I've always been teaching da'wah to Muslims and to non-Muslims. Because the reality is we cannot just work on one side and ignore the other. And we don't also want to be like, I remember I would be traveling around the world and I would meet certain people who believe that you should give da'wah to Muslims only. And they even one time, one of them very politely said, if you haven't regained your capital, why are you trying to get more profit? And it's nice. But what's beautiful is when you zoom out of the Muslim community and you take like a holistic view, right, or a bird's eye view, you will appreciate that some of us are giving da'wah to non-Muslims, some are giving da'wah to Muslims, some are taking care of the elderly, some are politically involved. If we were all doing the same thing, it would be a disaster. So I actually don't want everyone to give da'wah to non-Muslims only. I'm happy that there's some people who are involved in politics because I could not stomach that for 5 minutes. This diversity is excellent. And our job isn't to come and try to get the other guy to stop what he's doing because what I'm doing is superior. And if you allow me to share this story, I really, really love this story where one of the zuhad, so someone who left the material world and he would like go sit in a cave alone and worship Allah. He wrote a letter to Imam Malik. So Imam Malik, rahimahullah, is a scholar who sits and teaches and he's teaching the hadith of the Prophet. He's doing an important job. But the Zahid wrote him a letter and he said, it's better for you to not sit with these crowds and these gatherings and to not wear fancy clothing and then to go and seclude yourself in a cave and worship Allah Azza wa Jal. So Imam Malik wrote him a letter that's so beautiful. He began by saying, Inna Allah qassama al-a'mal kama qassama al-arzaq. He tells him Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distributed people's actions, deeds, and he, like this person, he's good at fasting, but he's not good with charity. This person has a lot of money, he can give a lot of charity, but he's not good at qiyam al-layl. Allah gave this guy the ability to do a lot of qiyam, this guy memorized the Quran, this guy to give in charity, this guy. So he says Allah distributed the deeds like that, the same way He distributed wealth. This guy is rich, this guy is middle class, this guy is poor. So He tells them it's not for one person to tell the other, stop what you're doing, come do what I do, it's more superior. So as if everyone in the community is doing something, it's great. But I have shifted, and I do believe it's very important to focus on our youth. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, and that is the idea of we complement each other, and that is somebody's doing this work, somebody else is doing that work, and I love social services, for example, but that's
Absolutely.
not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, or that's not necessarily what everybody else enjoys. So you say that the idea of focusing on our youth, and I know that you do some work with the youth, and I know that our audience appreciate the work that's being done, giving da'wah to non-Muslims, but the notion of taking care of family first. What are you seeing with our youth that is concerning to the point that 1 out of every 4 are no longer identifying as Muslims?
Right. So a lot of times, and a lot of times, it's what they're exposed to. Sometimes it's a combination, obviously, of peers, and they have a huge effect on you, right? So they have a lot of non-Muslim friends, bad company. Some of them just, there's a mentality we have where people go out looking for trouble. I have a case, I don't want to get too many details, but where one of them would go into YouTube and just listen to this atheist, one of the popular atheists, and he's attacking Islam and belief in God and the logic of it and all that, and he's saying it's irrational, and just bashing religion nonstop and bashing Islam in particular. Okay, so why would you go and just listen to that? You don't even know enough about your own deen to keep your iman firm. Shaykh Yasir, it's like I always tell people, when you have something that's dear to you, you don't put it in harm's way. Like you have your tablet, your iPhone, these smartphones that we love so much. Would you take your smartphone, put it in a park, and say, I'll come back 3 days later to test if it's there or not, right? It was like this guy, he said, I pray with this one of my students once told me, I would pray with the TV on just to test my khushu', Habibi, your khushu' is probably messed up without the television being on. Why would you test yourself? So you go in and you start. Many cases that I dealt with. One guy, he said, I was preparing to be a da'iyah. Before learning the deen, he said, I went and read Dawkins' book, I don't want to promote the book, but he said, I read that book and I left Islam. Like, start right. This mentality of let me tackle all the challenges first and clear them and get all the doubt out of the way, and then I'll go head first into it. So I've seen a lot of cases where because now atheist, as you know well, is presented like it's rational, like it's logical. And I got an email from the American University in Egypt a long time ago, inviting me to come give a lecture on atheism, because he said so many of the youth, they say they're atheist, not because they really don't believe in the existence of Allah Azza wa Jal, but because that's the, what's the word, like the trend or the fashion and it symbolizes that I'm science-based, that I'm rational, that I'm logical, even though we're logical, we're rational, we can through scientific analysis conclude that Allah Azza wa Jal exists, but that's how they're selling it. And it's a whole bunch of things, but I've had so many experiences with people just like that.
Interesting. I remember reading the story on Isa alayhi salam, Prophet Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, that one time as he was up in the mountain, it says that Shaitan, or the devil, came to him and he said, do you trust the Lord? And Jesus said, indeed, I do trust the Lord. He said, well, why don't you jump and see if the Lord would save you? And Jesus said to him, it is not my job to test the Lord. The idea of put your trust in Allah and just do this. He said, look, man, at that point, it's not me trusting Allah. It is me testing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's not what you do as a believer. And I absolutely love that story.
I love it. It's wonderful. Shaykh Yasir, let me tell you something. There's so many factors, but I just remembered another one. You know how many people, Muslims I've met, who left Islam because of philosophy class. Okay,
Yeah.
and sometimes philosophy is taught in literature. English class, there'll be a piece that's on philosophy, and that professor or that instructor is not equipped to teach philosophy, confuses the students. And I'm talking about what I call ridiculous philosophy. Is this a spoon? How do you know it's a spoon? Maybe you think it's a spoon because your whole life you were told it's a spoon. Like, it's an elephant, Habibi. It's an elephant. What do you think it is? So here's what happened. Okay, I had this case where this young man, he was going to commit suicide. So his friends brought him to me. All right. Now, he said, his philosophy professor said, life and death, they are both nothing. Death is nothing and life is nothing. So whether you're alive or dead, it doesn't matter. Even though I'm sure if someone threatened this professor's life, he would want his life. He wouldn't say they're all the same. So this young man from one class in philosophy, he wanted to take his life. And then guess what he tells me in our meeting? He says, I'm thinking of doing a major in philosophy. Habibi, one class, you're going to kill yourself. What are you going to do if you major in philosophy?
Yeah.
You won't even finish.
Yeah. And you know, sometimes people, and I tell people to make sure that you differentiate between good sounding arguments and good sound arguments. And some people are truly masters of good sounding arguments. And when you do not pay attention, and I remember I took this philosophy class, and it was such a turn off that I actually didn't go to the class anymore. So I'm in the class, and the teacher talking about philosophy. So he said, let's exercise. And he holds the philosophy book, and it was a green book. And he said, what color is this book? And nobody said anything because remember, it's a philosophy class. You're not supposed to answer the obvious. So Brave Soul raised his hand and he said, it appears to be green. And it was really green. It was only green. We said it appears to be green, but somebody can argue it's black. And the teacher congratulated the student, said, and now we are getting into. And I remember sitting there, I just raised my hand. I said, what? I said, look, this is like 20 years ago. I said, look, if I cross a red light and the police officer pulls me over and he goes, you just crossed the red light. I said, officer, you should have been in my philosophy class. See, what is red to you was actually green to me. I said, it does not matter what I think it is. My thoughts do not change the reality that it was a red light. But people are just, because we are intellectually lazy, and I really, I don't mean this in a condescending way, but the reality of it is that we're just intellectually lazy and we are easily fooled by these good sounding arguments. They're not good sound arguments, they're only good sounding, and that becomes problematic. Right, so do me a favor, Sheikh. Now this time is just passing by very quickly. So question is regarding what value does Islam bring to people? I mean, obviously when you're giving people da'wah, you are giving them something that is of value. So what is that value that Islam would bring to people?
All right. Let me try something creative. Can I try to answer this question in an actual story, something that actually happened?
Please.
So this was Washington, D.C. All right. And back then I couldn't recognize the drug dealer. So I'm giving da'wah to this guy, and he was a drug dealer. Now I can spot them, but I didn't know back then. So first,
We're going
saying,
to have a session on that, by the way. How do you spot them? But
okay, how to spell a drug dealer in 10 seconds, right? So basically, we came up to him, and we were dressed like when we would dress when we'd go and give street da'wah, dressed in a way that says we're Muslim, even though again, decades of experience indicate that there is no difference whether you wear a thobe or shirt and pants. Okay, because some people think, oh, if you wear this you'll turn people off, but for the most part, we would just dress kind of, sometimes a kurta, what they call a kurta, like or shirt and pants, just normal. Anyways, but that day we were dressed differently. So he knew we were Muslim. So we said we're calling you to Allah. We're telling people about Islam. So he said, if I become Muslim, will y'all give me some money? I said no. He said, if I become Muslim, will Allah give me a brick? I said, what is a brick? He said, a brick of cocaine. Apparently, that is a wholesale item, and then they break it down for retail, right? So So, and then his friends were like, hey, you guys are scaring away business. Could you go away? So, and I've never done this before that moment, and I have never done it until today. But I used another technique, which, and basically, we just brought it up a notch. We weren't aggressive, but we brought it up a notch. So I told him, listen, and this is maybe, hopefully, the answer to your question, right? What value? What if someone says, I'm a millionaire, I'm comfortable, I have cars. Why do I need Islam? You need Islam in this world and you need it in the next world. If I can't convince you need it in this world, I will easily, inshallah, convince you need it in the next world. So this guy told him, you think you're smart, you think you're standing here making some money, let me tell you something. You will die, because everybody dies. And when you die, three things are going to go with you to your grave: your family, your wealth, and your good deeds. And when you're put down in the ground, you will have nothing but your good deeds. And we told him, angels, stern and severe, will come and ask you three questions. And if you're not a believer, you can't answer these questions. But your family is going to come back to fight over your wealth, and you'll have nothing but these deeds. And well, let me tell you, and I've never done this before, but when we left this guy, he was frozen in his place like this, with his jaw dropped, and he got it. So if I can't sell you on why Islam's going to benefit you in this world, I will, inshallah, easily sell you on why you need it in the next world. Because everybody knows you're going to die. And you can't tell me what happens when you die. Have you been there and come back? You can't. But we have a book from Allah, we have a truthful prophet, and we can tell you what happens when you die. And that was one of the, and that's why that guy was so successful, Shaykh Yasir, because he would tell people about the questions of the grave, and he would tell people about the hellfire, and even the professor is concerned about where he goes. That's why it worked, really. If you want to go down to the basics, that's why.
Interesting. And Sheikhna, what about da'wah post 9/11? And I know that, and I'm not sure, you said it was 10 years ago, but how has 9/11 impacted the way that da'wah is given, or whether da'wah is still given or not?
Okay. So a lot of my good experience in da'wah was after 9/11. And Islam, so I know it sounds strange, but Islam already being in the headlines and people knowing about some people called Muslims and something called Islam actually made it easier to talk about it, versus before, maybe many people weren't even aware what it is. And Shaykh Yasir, I tell you, sometimes we're not aware of how little people know about Islam. Some of my friends, they printed this big poster and they were distributing free Qur'ans. So the poster said free Qur'an. He said an old lady came up to them and she said, what did Qur'an do exactly? She thought Qur'an was a guy who's in jail and they're trying to get him out of jail saying free Qur'an. That's what we're dealing with. After 9/11, everyone had some kind of idea. So believe it or not, it actually made it easier to give da'wah. And every now and then there's an aggressive guy, right? But like that guy I was telling you about, that amazing da'iyah, he went and gave da'wah at ground zero, where they were still cleaning up the rubble, you know? So I know we imagine in our minds that people will be aggressive and not and unreceptive, but it's the exact opposite. The exact opposite.
Beautiful. Alrighty. So I don't know enough about Islam to give da'wah. At what level am I ready to give da'wah to other people?
Okay. If you like, we've got two things, right? We've got the best, the highest level you can be, and we've got the lowest acceptable level. And everyone listening to us now is beyond the lowest acceptable level. What do I mean by that? Every Muslim right now has enough information to keep them Muslim, right? Like if you didn't know about Allah Azza wa Jal, you can't really be Muslim. But you know that Allah is one, you know that He sent a messenger. These basic things that keep you Muslim are enough to go and call people to Islam with. We're talking about what is the lowest level. What I know to keep me Muslim is enough to go and bring someone else to Islam. Now, we all admit that the more knowledgeable you are, the better human and social skills you have, the more effective you'll be in da'wah. But I always tell people in class, because one of the obstacles to giving da'wah is you tell yourself, I need to learn more before I can call people to Allah. Or I need to build my own iman before I call people to Islam. And that's just a way that shaitan keeps you, because there's never going to be a point where you wake up and say, let me check my iman. Okay, it's 100%. Let me check my knowledge. I'm ready for da'wah today. That day will never come. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he went out on the first day and he brought 5 out of the 10 given glad tidings of paradise. Now, and without any disrespect, I would tell my class, everyone sitting here, including the children, have more knowledge about Islam right now than Abu Bakr had on day one. On day one, what did Abu Bakr know about Islam? He knew two things. There's only one God, and that man, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is his messenger. Did he know anything else? Was there Islam? Was there Salah? Was there Sayyah? Nothing. There was nothing. And he called people to that. So again, I'm not recommending you only have that knowledge. I'm saying, but that can qualify you. And man, okay, let me tell you another story. It's crazy with dawah. This happened to me. It was a Million Family March in Washington, D.C. We're passing out pamphlets. Okay. So this guy's coming down this way, and I'm going in the opposite direction on the sidewalk. I gave him a pamphlet, and I kept walking. I didn't even say anything to him. I just handed it to him. He took it. I kept walking. I turned around to look at him. He stopped walking, and he's reading it now. Now, you read into these things. It means he's interested, because I'm passing out pamphlets all day, and people just keep walking by. But he stopped. That means he's interested. So I walked back to him. And no exaggeration, Shaykh Yasir. Guess what he said to me? He said, okay, what do I do now? I said, for what? He said, to become Muslim. I said, you know, it's serious, and when you become Muslim, you don't leave. He said, yes, yes, yes. What do I do? So you know how I did it, Shaykh Yasir? It's all in the wrist. It's how I gave him the pamphlet. It's in the wrist movement. You understand? I have a technique. Of course not. Shaykh Yasir, a chimpanzee could have given him that pamphlet, and he could have been ready to become Muslim. Because I don't know his backstory. Maybe he left home knowing it's the Million Family March, which, by the way, was set up by the Nation of Islam. So the word Islam is there. Maybe he left home looking for Islam. Actually, that day we met someone who said, I got out of bed today searching for Allah. He said it like that. So suppose now the guy who handed him the pamphlet has very little knowledge of Islam. I mean, everybody has a place. All you have to do is hand that pamphlet out. Sometimes you don't even have to speak. So that's why when we get down to it, everybody's qualified to do something in dawah. But we will admit, the more knowledge, the better it is for you. No doubt.
Beautiful. Shaykhna, this has been a really, really nice, beautiful, and I must say inspiring conversation. We all are capable of sharing something about Islam with anyone and everyone. We can model it, we can speak it, we can all do something about it. And I also feel that this conversation could have just continued going on and on and on. Why did you stop the class? And we have a minute left. Where is the class nowadays?
The dawah class, it's on YouTube. There's a 3-hour version, and there's a 5-hour audio version on the internet, and there's a 13-hour very detailed version on YouTube, where I unfortunately had long hair, but it's very thorough, and I would advise you listen to just half an hour a week as you take notes, and then, most importantly, try the techniques. Maybe they don't work, maybe they do, but you have to try them.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Shaykhna, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on, and inshallah, we will continue this conversation again. I know that inshallah, sometime in the very, very near future. And to all of our viewers, Jazakumullah khair as always. Thank you for tuning in. And please do let us know what you thought. And inshallah, until we see you next time, we say so long and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.